Is the Samsung Galaxy A71 5G worth buying in 2021? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. Hey everybody, this is Andre here covering for Kevin on the Kevin Breeze channel, and in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Samsung Galaxy A71 5G. Now this is not to be confused with the Samsung Galaxy A71, as the Samsung Galaxy A71 and the A71 5G are completely different phones. These days, you can find the Samsung Galaxy A71 5G factory unlocked for all major carriers. To get more information on the pricing, availability, or to learn more about the phone in general, be sure to check the link in the description below. This is going to take you right to the phone on Samsung's website, where they offer a lot of great trade deals that you're not going to be able to find anywhere else. Now, this phone was released in June of 2020, so it's relatively new, but what kind of value are we getting from it today? Well, we're about to find out. This phone has a 6.7-inch Super AMOLED Plus display with a resolution of 1080p and a PPI of 393. The aspect ratio is 20:9, and it has a screen-to-body ratio of 88.3%. This phone has really thin bezels, in fact, even thinner bezels than the Samsung Galaxy A51 5G, which I personally thought were already thin. I really like this appearance. It definitely not only makes the screen bigger for functional purposes, but also has a really nice modern look to it. We have a hole punch for the front-facing camera right here. Now this camera is 32 megapixels, which is definitely a powerful camera. Now this phone has 128 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD expansion. This is a great amount of storage that's going to give you a lot of space to do what you need to with this phone. To put it into perspective, the iPhone starts out at 64 gigabytes of storage, and it's a lot more expensive than this phone. So technically, storage-wise, this phone is already better than those entry-level iPhones. So you're really going to be getting great value out of it. To give you an idea of what this storage looks like, I have everything that I use on a daily basis downloaded onto the phone, and it's only taking up 22% of the storage. Now this is going to be great if you're running larger apps or taking a lot of photos and videos, or even if you just use the phone for basic activities. No matter what your situation is, more storage is better, and this has a lot of it. Now there's no wireless charging for this phone, unfortunately, but there is a fingerprint scanner. Now a lot of phones these days have fingerprint scanners on the back. Most of the entry-level and mid-range phones that have fingerprint scanners do have external scanners usually located on the back instead of on the display. Even higher-end phones like the Google Pixel have them on the back. And then there are some phones like the iPhones that don't even have them at all. But this phone has one right on the display. It really adds to the modern, more digital appearance of this phone, and I think it's really nice. Let's go ahead and give the scanner a try. One more time. This phone's really fast and responsive. Definitely most of Samsung's phones do have really good fingerprint scanners, with the exception of a few of the older Galaxies where they were still working things out. I definitely think that Samsung does have really reliable fingerprint scanners, but this one, personally, I feel is among the best. One of the advantages of having a digital fingerprint scanner on the display is that it doesn't have a lot of opportunity for dirt and debris to get on the fingerprint scanner and get in the way of scanning. If you have an indentation for the fingerprint scanner on the back of the phone, like say the Google Pixel does, then there's a big possibility of something getting stuck in that little hole, and then when you go to scan your finger on it, it might pick that up and not actually read it. Whereas this phone has it on the display, and it's a lot easier to keep clean, and as such, it's going to recognize your finger a lot more easily. In addition to that, if you do like to use Face Unlock, this phone has the option for that as well. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, we do have a quad camera setup with a 64 megapixel rear camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 5 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 5 megapixel macro camera. The macro camera is really nice to have. The ultra wide feature is nice as well. Although most new phones do have ultra wide cameras nowadays, this one has a lot higher megapixel ultra wide camera than most phones I've seen, so that's really good too. Now this is the regular photo mode, of course, and if you want to go to ultra wide, press this button right here. And there you go. The macro mode is right here. And then you can get those close-up images. If you do a lot of photography, then this is definitely going to be useful for you. And of course, the portrait mode is found through live focus. And one thing I really like about this portrait mode is you can control the blur of the background. This is the front-facing camera, of course, and we are in portrait mode right now. I know a lot of the time the quality of the front-facing camera is typically not as high as the rear camera, but for this camera, it's definitely great quality. The image is really crisp. The portrait mode is really high quality. It looks professional. So I personally would not mind using this frequently. If you're doing a lot of content creation, this device is really a good option. It's definitely going to give you crisp portrait pictures. And overall, I would say it's really usable. The video mode of the phone. We are shooting in 4K right now. Also keep in mind the audio quality. So that was the video mode of the phone, of course. As you could tell, the audio quality was pretty good. This phone's able to shoot 4K videos in both the front and rear cameras, which is really nice. As I said when testing the normal photo mode of the front-facing camera, a lot of the time, the front-facing camera is significantly lower quality than the rear camera. But with this phone, that's not really the case. Not only is the image good for the photo mode, but it's also able to shoot just as high quality videos in the front-facing camera as it is in the rear. So I really like that about this phone. Another thing I really liked is the phone's speaker. I personally don't really like to use headphones and speakers all the time when I'm consuming content on a phone. So having a good quality phone speaker is definitely important to me. And when I turned the volume all the way up on this phone, it didn't really even get distorted, which happens in a lot of phones. But with this phone, it stayed crisp the whole time, and I really liked that. Definitely, if you're using this phone for either content consumption or content creation, or both, the features it has both on the camera and the playback are really going to come in handy. Now, internally, we're getting 6 GB of RAM with the Exynos 980 processor. Now, one thing to keep in mind, this is the unlocked variant of the phone, and if you get it through a carrier, it's going to have a different processor, and that means there's going to be a slight difference in performance. Again, this specific phone I have in my hand is the unlocked variant, and the 6 GB of RAM with the Exynos 980 processor does apply to the unlocked variant, and not the variants you would get through a carrier. Now that being said, I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it came back with a single core score of 604 and a multi-core score of 1875. These are really good numbers, especially if you're in that mid-range doing a lot of content consumption, some content creation here and there. With photo and video editing, it's definitely going to hold up. Even light gaming is going to run well with this phone. The only time I would say you would have to look into a more powerful phone than this is if you're getting into the realm of heavy content creation, like lots of video editing, or lots of gaming that really requires an insane amount of processing, then you might want to look into a more higher end phone like the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE, or even an older flagship phone like the Note 9. But this processor is definitely powerful, and for most situations, especially casual use of your device, it's really going to get the job done. This phone does have a 4500 milliamp hour battery that supports 25 watt fast charging, which is really powerful, and if you're comparing this to an older flagship phone, definitely this is going to have the edge. Those older flagship phones not only have smaller batteries, but they're not going to be as fresh as a more recent phone like this. And again, 4500 milliamp hours, that's really close to those Motorola phones that are known for their huge batteries. So you're definitely going to get a lot of battery life, a lot of power out of this. And with the processor this has, especially if you're doing more intense activities, you'll definitely need that. Another thing, I know a lot of people looking at a phone like this are also considering older flagship models. This phone does run on Android 10, so keep that in mind. Those older flagship models, especially the ones that are like 2 or 3 years old, are not going to have Android 10. They're most likely going to have Android 8 or 9. So if having the latest features and the latest version of Android is the most important thing to you, or at least among the most important, then you're definitely going to want to look at more something like this as opposed to an older phone. Now that we've gone over some of the specs, let's take a look at the hardware. So up top here, we have a slot for the SIM card and micro SD card, as well as right here, there's this little hole for the noise canceling microphone. At the bottom here, we have a 3.5mm headphone jack, USB-C charging port, a microphone, and the speaker. Nothing going on the left side, but it looks really clean and really smooth. On the right, we have our standard volume up button, volume down button, and the power button right here. On the back, we have a camera setup, our flash right here, and the back is made of a really nice glossy finish. But one thing to keep in mind is that fingerprints do show up. It's definitely not the worst I've seen, but they do show up, so be aware of that. All around, the phone is made of a really nice high-end material, has some good weight to it, and it definitely doesn't feel cheap. In fact, it feels more like a flagship phone than anything. With this phone, it definitely doesn't feel like a budget phone per se. It really does feel like a high-end device, and you can really tell that just by holding it. The overall look of it is really nice, and as I've said before, I really do think this device is going to age well. I think 5 years from now, you're going to be able to look at a device like this. It's not really going to look like an old phone. I definitely don't think it's going to have that dated look even in the future, as something like, say, the Samsung Galaxy S8, or even older, the S6, and those older models really have that super old look. Even though they were created in 2016, it feels like they were created in 2008. Whereas this phone, I feel like in 2025, you're going to be able to look at this phone and it's not really going to look that old. Now, in conclusion, is this phone worth buying in 2021? I definitely think this phone still has great value in 2021. Whether or not it's the best option for you really depends on what your specific needs are. If you're going for a phone just for basic activities and you're not going to be doing a whole lot else, maybe sometimes you'll be doing a more intense activity, you really might not benefit a whole lot from this phone. And if you want the option to do more high-end stuff, I would honestly suggest either an older flagship phone or maybe something like the Samsung Galaxy A51 5G that's not quite as high-end, but since you're not going to be really using all the features, it's not going to matter a whole lot. Now, if you're doing more moderate to high-end activities, then I would definitely say this phone really has its value. That's where the powerful processor really comes into play. This is going to be able to handle pretty much anything you'd be doing, especially if it's just content creation, that kind of thing. I think this phone is definitely going to be able to get the job done. Now, if you're doing something really high-end like gaming, it requires a whole lot of processing power, but might not use the features of the phone itself per se, then I would say that's when you might want to look at an older flagship phone. Those older flagship phones, especially like the newer older ones, like the Note 9, for example, do have a lot of processing power, more than this even. They might not have the newest Android features, but if you're doing something that doesn't really rely on those features, as long as the phone's not super old like the S6 or something, if you're doing something that doesn't need the latest version of Android or the latest camera features and all that stuff, but just need raw processing power, then one of those old flagship phones might work out better than this. But if getting the latest version of Android is still important to you and you are doing stuff like gaming that requires a ton of processing power, then at that point you might want to look at something like the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE, which still isn't quite in the range of those super high-end flagship phones, but it's still going to be super high performance without having to spend a whole lot more. But again, for moderate to high level range activities, if you're doing a lot of content consumption, a lot of photo and video editing, and maybe some light gaming, then this phone is definitely going to be one of the better options. All in all, whether or not it's the best option for you really depends on your needs, but overall, I definitely think this phone is still very worth buying in 2021 and provides a great value. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.